Hey crew, it is Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Manly Hall. This is the secret teachings of all ages. We are up to 15 now, I think. This is the Pythagorean theory of music and color. We are reading along and discussing as we go along. The little bits of information that I possess will be dispensed as we go through the material. So it is not just reading, but if this isn't the format for you, that is perfectly understandable, and be blessed. Before we begin, there are various links up here that let you know about me, my unconventional beliefs, and are a resource for you in case you get lost in the weeds or some of the terminology is a little bit too confusing. I tend to put the definitions and what we are about at the beginning of the playlist so that you can find out rather quickly whether or not you want to be here. With that being said, we are going to dive into the text and begin. This is the Pythagorean theory of music and color.
Harmony is a state recognized by great philosophers as the immediate prerequisite of beauty. A compound is termed beautiful only when its parts are in harmonious combination. The world is called beautiful and its creator is designated as the good, because good, perforce, must act in conformity with its own nature. And good acting
According to its own nature is harmony. Because the good which it accomplishes is harmonious with the good which it is, beauty, therefore, is harmony, manifesting its own intrinsic nature into the world of form. The universe is made up of successive gradations of good, these gradations ascending from matter, which is the least degree of good, to spirit, which is the greatest degree of good. In man, his superior nature is the summum bonum. It therefore follows that his highest nature most readily cognizes good, because the good external to him in a world is in harmonic ratio with the good present in his soul. What man terms evil is therefore in common with matter, merely the least degree of its own opposite. The least degree of good presupposes likewise the least degree of harmony and beauty. Thus, deformity, evil, is really the least harmonious combination of elements, naturally harmonic as individual units. Deformity is unnatural, for, the sum of all things being the good, it is natural that all things should partake of the good and be arranged in combinations that are harmonious. Harmony is the manifesting expression of the will of the eternal good. The philosophy of music. This is a good. It's as good as any other explanation of good and evil, right? It's not necessarily the truth, but it resonates in a very real way, and so I don't just dismiss it. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be untrue. It's just one way of expressing a thing that is. The philosophy of music. It is highly probable that the Greek initiates gained their knowledge of the philosophic and therapeutic aspects of music from the Egyptians, who, who, in turn, considered Hermes the founder of the art. According to one legend, this god constructed the first lyre by stretching strings across the concavity of a turtle shell. Both Isis and Osiris were patrons of music and poetry. Plato, in describing the antiquity of these arts among the Egyptians, declared that songs and poetry had existed in Egypt for at least 10,000 years, and that these were of such an exalted and inspiring nature that only gods, or godlike men, could have composed them. In the mysteries, the lyre was regarded as the secret symbol of the human constitution, the body of the instrument representing the physical form, the strings the nerves, and the musician the spirit. Playing upon the nerves, the spirit thus created the harmonies of normal functioning, which, however, became discords if the nature of man were defiled. While the early Chinese, Hindus, Persians, Egyptians, Israelites, and Greeks employed both vocal and instrumental music in their religious ceremonials, also to complement their poetry and drama, it remained for Pythagoras to raise the art to its true dignity by demonstrating its mathematical foundation. Although it is said that he himself was not a musician, Pythagoras is now generally credited with the discovery of the diatonic scale, having first learned the divine theory of music from the priest of the various mysteries into which he had been accepted. Pythagoras pondered for several years upon the laws governing consonance and dissonance. How he actually solved the problem is unknown, but the following explanation has been invented. One day, while meditating upon the problem of harmony, Pythagoras chanced to pass a brazier shop where workmen were pounding out a piece of metal upon an anvil. By noting the variances in pitch between the sounds made by large hammers and those made by smaller implements, and carefully estimating the harmonies and discords resulting from the combinations of these sounds, he gained his first clue to the musical intervals of the diatonic scale. He entered the shop, and after carefully examining the tools and making mental note of their weights, returned to his own house and constructed an arm of wood so that it extended out from the wall of his room. At regular intervals along this arm he attached 4 cords, all of like composition, size, and weight. To the first of these he attached a 12-pound weight, to the second a 9-pound weight, to the third an 8-pound weight, and to the fourth a 6-pound weight. These different weights corresponded to the size of the brazier's hammers. Pythagoras thereupon discovered that the first and fourth strings, when sounded together, produced the harmonic interval of the octave, for doubling the weight had the same effect as halving the string, the tension of the first string being twice that of the fourth string. Their ratio was said to be 2 to 1, or double. By similar experimentation, he ascertained that the first and third string produced the harmony of the diapente, or the interval of the fifth. The tension of the first string being half again as much as that of the third string, their ratio was said to be 3 to 2, or sesquialter. Likewise, the second and fourth strings, having the same ratio as the first and third strings, yielded a diapente harmony. Continuing his investigation, Pythagoras discovered that the first and second strings produced the harmony of the diatessaron, or the interval of the third, and the tension of the first string, being a third greater than that of the second string, their ratio was said to be 4 to 3, or sesquitercian. The third and fourth strings, having the same ratio as the first and second strings, produced another harmony of the diatessaron. According to Iamblichus, the second and third strings had the ratio of 8 to 9, or epogdoen. The key to harmonic ratios is hidden in the famous Pythagorean tetrachus, or pyramid of dots. The tetrachus is made up of the first 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which in their proportions reveal the intervals of the octave, the diapente, and the diatessaron. While the law of harmonic intervals, as set forth above, is true, it is subsequently proved that hammers striking metal in the manner described will not produce the various tones ascribed to them. In all probability, therefore, Pythagoras actually worked out his theory of harmony from the monochord, a contrivance consisting of a single string stretched between 2 pegs and supplied with movable frets. I was going to say the same thing. If you don't know, I used to be a blacksmith, and while there is some tonic variation between the things, it is not going to give you this. It's just not. The intervals and harmonies of the spheres. This makes a lot of sense. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 lines, 7 sections, not including Terra. And that's going to be the 8th, which leads into the octave. I have the whole theory of the fundamental harmonics is included in the Infinite Integrations playlist so that you can go back and watch what I feel about this in particular. We will probably discuss some of it here, but I do believe that there is a harmonic, right? There is 8 steps to pretty much every single thing, 8 being the number of the new, right? And so you have the 7 steps and then the new, which is E repeated or C repeated or A repeated, wherever you happen to start the chord progression. And so I do believe that there is an 8-step process that leads to the harmonies. It is tied to the 8, which is important in almost everything else. The intervals and harmonies of the spheres. Let's go ahead and read this now. In the Pythagorean concept of music of the spheres, the interval between the earth and the sphere of the fixed stars was considered to be diapason, the most perfect harmonic interval. The following arrangement is most generally accepted for the musical intervals of the planets between the earth and the sphere of the fixed stars. From the sphere of the earth to the sphere of the moon, 1 tone. From the sphere of the moon to that of Mercury, 1/2 tone. From Mercury to Venus, 1/2. From Venus to the Sun, 1.5. From the Sun to Mars, 1. From Mars to Jupiter, 1/2. From Jupiter to Saturn, 1/2. And from Saturn to the fixed stars, 1/2 tone. The sum of those intervals equals the 6 whole tones of the octave. There are not 6 tones in the octave. There are 7, 8, including the beginning of the new. Consonances of the mundane monochord. This diagrammatic sector represents the major gradations of energy and substance between elemental earth and absolute unconditioned force. Beginning with the superior, the 15 graduated spheres, descending in the following order: limitless and eternal life, the superior, the middle and the inferior empyrean, the 7 planets and the 4 elements. Energy is symbolized by flood as a pyramid with its base upon the concave surface of the superior empyrean, and substance as another pyramid with its base upon the convex surface of the sphere, not planet, of Earth. These pyramids demonstrate the relative proportion of energy and substance entering into the composition of the 15 planes of being. It will be noted that the ascending pyramid of substance touches but does not pierce the 15th sphere, that of limitless and eternal life. Likewise, the descending pyramid of energy touches but does not pierce the first sphere, the grossest condition of substance. The plane of the sun is denominated by the sphere of equality, for here neither energy nor substance predominate. The mundane monochord consists of a hypothetical string stretched from the base of the pyramid of energy to the base of the pyramid of substance. To Pythagoras, music was one of the dependencies of the divine science of mathematics, and its harmonies were inflexibly controlled by mathematical proportions. The Pythagoreans averred that mathematics demonstrated the exact method by which the good established and maintained its universe. Number, therefore, preceded harmony, since it was the immutable law that governs all harmonic proportions. After discovering these harmonic ratios, Pythagoras gradually initiated his disciples into this, the supreme arcanum of his mysteries. He divided the multitudinous parts of creation into a vast number of planes or spheres, to each of which he assigned a tone, a harmonic interval, a number, a name, a color, and a form. He then proceeded to prove the accuracy of his deductions by demonstrating them upon the different planes of intelligence and substance, ranging from the most abstract logical premise to the most concrete geometrical solid. From the common agreement of these diversified methods of proof, he established the indisputable existence of certain natural laws. Having once established music as an exact science, Pythagoras applied his newly found law of harmonic intervals to all the phenomena of nature, even going so far as to demonstrate the harmonic relationship of the planets, constellations, and elements to each other. A notable example of modern corroboration of ancient philosophical teaching is that of the progression of the elements according to harmonic ratios. While making a list of the elements in the ascending order of their atomic weights, John A. Newlands discovered at every 8th element a distinct representation of properties. This discovery is known as the law of octaves in modern chemistry, which is the fundamental harmonics of life. Since they held that harmony must be determined not by the sense perceptions, but by reason and mathematics, the Pythagoreans called themselves canonics, as distinguished from musicians of the harmonic school, who asserted taste and instinct to be the true normative principles of harmony. Recognizing, however, the profound effect of music upon the senses and emotions, Pythagoras did not hesitate to influence the mind and body with what he termed musical medicine. Pythagoras evinced such a marked preference for stringed instruments that he even went so far as to warn his disciples against allowing their ears to be defiled by the sounds of flutes or cymbals. He further declared that the soul could be purified from its irrational influences by solemn songs sung to the accompaniment of the lyre. In his investigation of the therapeutic value of harmonics, Pythagoras discovered that the 7 modes, or keys, of the Greek system of music had the power to incite or allay the various emotions. It is related that while observing the stars one night he encountered a young man, befuddled with strong drink and mad with jealousy, who was piling faggots about his mistress's door. That is not a bad word, y'all don't come at me, with the intention of burning the house. The frenzy of the youth was accentuated by a flutist in short distance away who was playing a tune in the stirring Phrygian mode. Pythagoras induced the magician to change his air to the slow and rhythmic spondic mode, whereupon the intoxicated youth immediately became composed, and gathering up his bundles of wood, returned quietly to his own home. There is also an account of how Empedocles, a disciple of Pythagoras, by quickly changing the mode of a musical composition he was playing, saved the life of his host, Anchises, when the latter was threatened with death by the sword of one whose father he condemned to public execution. It is also known that Asclepius, the Greek physician, cured sciatica and other diseases of the nerves by blowing a loud trumpet in the presence of the patient. Pythagoras cured many ailments of the spirit, soul, and body by having certain specially prepared musical compositions played in the presence of the sufferer, or by personally reciting short selections from such early poets as Hesiod and Homer. In his university at Crotona, it was customary for the Pythagoreans to open and to close each day with songs. Those in the morning calculated to clear the mind from sleep and inspire it to the activities of the coming day. Those in the evening a mode of soothing, relaxing, and conducive to rest. At the vernal equinox, Pythagoras caused his disciples to gather in a circle around one of their number, who led them in a song and played their accompaniment on a lyre. The therapeutic music of Pythagoras is described by Iamblichus thus: "And there are certain melodies devised as remedies against the passions of the soul, and also against despondency and lamentation, which Pythagoras invented as things that afford the greatest assistance in these maladies. And again he employed other melodies against rage and anger, and against every aberration of the soul. There is also another kind of modulation, invented as a remedy against desires." It is probable that the Pythagoreans recognized a connection between the 7 Greek modes and the planets. As an example, Pliny declares that Saturn moves in the Dorian mode and Jupiter in the Phrygian mode. It is also apparent that the temperaments are keyed to the various modes, and the passions likewise. Thus, anger, which is a fiery passion, may be accentuated by a fiery mode, or its power neutralized by a watery mode. The far-reaching effect exercised by music upon the culture of the Greeks is thus summed up by Emil Naumann. Plato depreciated the notion that music was intended solely to create cheerful and agreeable emotions, maintaining, rather, that it should inculcate a love of all that is noble, and hatred of all that is mean, and that nothing could more strongly influence man's innermost feelings than melody and rhythm. Firmly convinced of this, he agreed with Damon of Athens, the musical instructor of Socrates, that the introduction of a new and presumably enervating scale would endanger the future of a whole nation, and that it was not possible to alter a key without shaking the very foundations of the state. Plato affirmed that music, which ennobled the mind, was a far higher kind than that which merely appealed to the senses, and he strongly insisted that it was the paramount duty of the legislature to suppress all music of an effeminate and lascivious nature, and to encourage only that which was pure and dignified, that bold and stirring melodies were for men, gentle and soothing ones for women. From this it is evident that music played a considerable part in the education of the Greek youth. The greatest care was also to be taken in the selection of instrumental music, because the absence of words rendered its signification doubtful, and it was difficult to foresee whether it would exercise upon the people a benign or baneful influence. Popular taste, being always tickled by sensuous and meretricious effects, was to be treated with deserved contempt. See the history of music. Even today, music is used with a telling effect in times of war, and religious music, while no longer developed in accordance with the ancient theory, still profoundly influences the emotions of the laity. This right here lets you know, in no uncertain terms, exactly why my reactions are the ones that they are. This is why I intentionally pick the music that I react to. This is why I don't mess with certain artists or certain songs, because my amplification of it is important to me. And so I focus in my reaction videos on things that can help people, that are people who are singing about actual real life problems, so that I can talk about how you actually help yourself to solve these actual real life problems. It's literally the foundations of this channel, is helping people. And the fact that I am selective in my music is entirely because of this, even though I had not read this before. The music of the spheres. The most sublime, but least known of all the Pythagorean speculations, was that of sidereal harmonics. It was said that of all men, only Pythagoras heard the music of the spheres. Apparently, the Chaldeans were the first people to conceive of the heavenly bodies joining in a cosmic chant as they moved in stately manner across the sky. Job describes a time when the stars of the morning sang together, and in The Merchant of Venice, the author of Shakespearean plays writes, "There's not the smallest orb which thou beholdst, but in his motion like an angel sings." So little remains, however, of the Pythagorean system of celestial music that it is only possible to approximate his actual theory. This is the mundane monochord with its proportions and intervals. As always, the original source material will be linked below if you want to come and investigate this. Right? I suck at music theory, so I am not the one to explain that. From Flood's De Musica Mundana. In this chart is set forth a summary of Flood's theory of universal music. The interval between the element of earth and the highest heaven is considered as a double octave, thus showing the two extremes of existence to be in disdiapason harmony. It signifies that the highest heaven of the sun, the earth, have the same time, the difference being in pitch. The sun is the lower octave of the highest heaven, and the earth the lower octave of the sun. The lower octave, F to G, comprises that part of the universe in which substance predominates over energy. Its harmonies, therefore, are more gross than those of the higher octave, G to G, wherein energy predominates over substance. If struck in the more spiritual part, writes Flood, the monochord will give eternal life. If struck in the more material part, transitory life. It will be noted that certain elements, planets, and celestial spheres contain a harmonic ratio to each other. Flood advanced this as a key to the sympathies and antipathies existing between the various departments of nature. Pythagoras conceived the universe to be an immense monochord, with its single string connected at its upper end to absolute spirit, and at its lower end to absolute matter. In other words, a cord stretched between heaven and earth. Counting inward from the circumference of the heavens, Pythagoras, according to some authorities, divided the universe into 9 parts, according to others into 12 parts. The 12-fold system was as follows. The first division was called the Empyrean, or the sphere of the fixed stars, and was the dwelling place of the immortals. The second to 12th divisions were, in order, the spheres of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon, and fire, air, water, and earth. This arrangement of the 7 planets, the Sun and Moon being regarded as planets in the old astronomy, is identical with the candlestick symbolism of the Jews. the sun in the center as the main stem with 3 planets on either side of it. The names given by the Pythagoreans to the various notes of the diatonic scale were, according to Macrobius, derived from an estimation of the velocity and magnitude of the planetary bodies. Each of these gigantic spheres, as it rushed endlessly through space, was believed to sound a certain tone, caused by its continuous displacement of the ethereal diffusion. As these tones were a manifestation of divine order and motion, it must necessarily follow that they partook of the harmony of their own source. The assertion that the planets in their revolutions round the earth uttered certain sounds, differing according to their respective magnitude, celerity, and local distance, was commonly made by the Greeks. Thus, Saturn, the farthest planet, was said to give the gravest note, while the moon, which is nearest, gave the sharpest. These sounds of the 7 planets and the sphere of the fixed stars, together with that above us, Antithecon, are the 9 muses, and their joint symphony is called Mnemosyne. See the canon. This quotation contains an obscure reference to the 9-fold division of the universe previously mentioned. That would be 8 instead of 9. The Greek initiates also recognized a fundamental relationship between the individual heavens or spheres of the 7 planets and the 7 sacred vowels. The first heaven uttered the sound of a sacred vowel, A, alpha. The second heaven, the sacred vowel, E, epsilon. The third, H, eta. The fourth, I, iota. The fifth, O, omicron. The sixth, Y, upsilon. And the 7th heaven, the sacred vowel, omega. When these 7 heavens sing together, they produce a perfect harmony, which ascends as an everlasting praise to the throne of the Creator. See Irenaeus' Against Heresies. Although not so stated, it is probable that the planetary heavens are to be considered as ascending in the Pythagorean order, beginning with the sphere of the moon, which would be the first heaven. Many early instruments had 7 strings, and it is generally conceded that Pythagoras was the one who added the 8th string to the lyre of Terpander. The 7 strings were always related both to their correspondences in the human body and to the planets. The names of gods were also conceived to be formed from combinations of the 7 planetary harmonies. The Egyptians confined their sacred songs to the 7 primary sounds, forbidding any others to be uttered in their temples. One of the hymns contained the following invocation: "The 7 sounding tones praise thee, the great God, the ceaseless working Father of the whole universe." In another, the deity describes himself thus: "I am the great indestructible lyre of the whole world, attuning the songs of heaven." We're going to pause just for a second because this part right here contradicts the earlier part. Because if there were other instruments that had 7 strings and Pythagoras modified one to the 8th, then he did not discover the harmonics. Right? They were there, other people were using them. He just gets credited with a lot of things that he may not necessarily have done. The Pythagoreans believed that everything which existed had a voice, and that all creatures were eternally singing the praise of the Creator. Man fails to hear these divine melodies because his soul is enmeshed in the illusion of material existence. When he liberates himself from the bondage of the lower world with its sense limitations, the music of the spheres will again be audible as it was in the Golden Age. Harmony recognizes harmony, and when the human soul regains its true estate, it will not only hear the celestial choir, but also join with it in an everlasting anthem of praise to that eternal good controlling the infinite number of parts and conditions of being. And see, this when he liberates himself from the bondage of the lower world with its sense limitations, the music of the spheres will again be audible, as it was in the Golden Age. Now, if you are unaware, I believe in a disaster cycle. I believe that every 6,000 years there's a disaster that hits this planet. It alternates between a hot one and a wet one, right? I have a whole video that you can go watch, 12,000 Year Disaster Cycle, where we talk about that. I believe that this planet was different prior to the last disaster. How exactly it was different, I don't know, but I am leaning towards the vapor canopy more and more these days. And it is entirely possible that if the vapor canopy was a real thing and that the Earth was more condensed or the air was more condensed and that growth was heavier, like bigger, and it was possible to do more things because of the conditions, then it is entirely possible that you could hear the planets moving in the sky. If that is not true, however, I find it extremely difficult to think that you would hear even the moon, our closest neighbor, making noise. That is possible. There is a rumor about it ringing when somebody landed on it. But some people don't believe we landed on it. I do. I do. In case you were wondering, I do not believe in flat Earth. I do believe we are in space. I have very good reasons for believing that, but you don't have to. This, again, is something that could be true, but is not a provable thing, and it is merely speculation, and I wanted to point that out. The Greek mysteries included in their doctrines a magnificent concept of the relationship existing between music and form. The elements of architecture, for example, were considered as comparable to musical modes and notes, or as having a musical counterpart. Consequently, when a building was erected in which a number of these elements were combined, the structure was then likened to a musical chord, which was harmonic only when it fully satisfied the mathematical requirements of harmonic intervals. The realization of this analogy between sound and form led Goethe to declare that architecture is crystallized music. In constructing their temples of initiation, the early priests frequently demonstrated their superior knowledge of the principles underlying the phenomena known as vibration. A considerable part of the mystery rituals consisted of invocations and intonements, for which purpose special sound chambers were constructed. A word whispered in one of these apartments was so intensified that the reverberations made the entire building sway and be filled with a deafening roar. The very wood and stone used in the erection of these sacred buildings eventually became so thoroughly permeated with the sound vibrations of the religious ceremonies that when struck they would reproduce the same tones, thus repeatedly impressed into their substances by the rituals. I would have to witness that in order to believe that. Every element in nature has its individual keynote. If these elements are combined in a composite structure, the result is a chord that, if sounded, will disintegrate the compound into its integral parts. Likewise, each individual has a keynote that, if sounded, will destroy him. This allegory of the walls of Jericho falling when the trumpets of Israel were sounded is undoubtedly intended to set forth the arcane significance of individual keynote or vibration. And I am going to direct you now to the Unconventional Bible Study, where we talked about this particular situation and what the probable cause of it was, and it was not this. Now, every individual element in nature probably does have its own individual keynote. Everything is a harmonic. That is a foundational thing that I hold, right? Everything is a harmonic. It is a fluctuation of vibratory energy. So everything does indeed have its sound, even if you can't hear it. That plays into the planets too. If we can't hear them, something would significantly have to change before we could. But sound has major, major benefits and detriments. That's why we do the reactions. We were just talking about that. It is entirely possible that there is a sound to countermand every single element. I do not dismiss that, even though Billy Carson said it. Or not, I keep doing that. It's Terrence Howard. I don't know why I keep saying Billy Carson. Terrence Howard, with his mathematical spiral that he was talking about with the periodic elements, this was an integral part of that. And I do not dismiss that particular part of Terrence Howard's stuff. Now, his 1 times 1 equaling 3 is fucking dumb. But other than that, we're good, right? He had a lot of really good ideas that he did not know how to express at all. This being one of them, right? The magnification repeating of the periodic table is almost a certainty. The Tycho's model of the universe is almost a certainty. And the fact that there are sounds that can do things is almost a certainty, right? I don't do the thing, so I will never say something that I have not experimentally done is fact, right? Unless there is significant reasons to believe so from other places. So when I say that I've seen the curvature of the earth and I don't believe the earth is flat, it is because I have seen the curvature of the earth. It has nothing to do with somebody else telling me it's a globe. When I say things and I stand on those things, it is because I personally have experienced those. I have not experienced this. I have not experienced making a sound and making something affect in that manner. I have not even seen it done. You can do things with sound, right? I forget the word for what it is, but if you sprinkle salt on a plate and you play uh, music underneath the plate, it will arrange itself into different sounds according to the music. That is part of the vibration of the universe, the fundamental harmonics of life, and so it does have an effect on structures. You can cuss at water, and it will freeze differently than if you show love to water. That is a real thing. It has been experimented by many people and shown to be true. So, again, vibratory nature of harmonics of life. I believe that. I don't necessarily believe some of the things, but this part probably so. The philosophy of color. Light, writes Edwin D. Babbitt, reveals the glories of the
external world, and yet is the most glorious of them all. It gives beauty, reveals beauty, and is itself most beautiful. It is the analyzer, the truth teller, and the exposer of shams, for it shows things as they are. Its infinite streams measure off the universe and flow into our telescopes from stars which are quintillions of miles distant. On the other hand, it descends to objects inconceivably small, and reveals through the microscope objects 50 millions of times less than can be seen by the naked eye. Like all other fine forces, its movement is wonderfully soft, yet penetrating and powerful. Without its vivifying influence, vegetable, animal, and human life must immediately perish from the earth, and general ruin take place. We shall do well, then, to consider this potential and beautiful principle of light and its component colors, for the more deeply we penetrate into its inner laws, the more will it present itself as a marvelous storehouse of power to vitalize, heal, refine, and delight mankind.
See the principles of light and color.
Since light is the basic physical manifestation of life, bathing
all creation in its radiance, it is highly important to realize, in part at least, the subtle nature of this divine substance. That which is called light is actually a rate of vibration causing certain reactions upon the optic nerve. Very few realize how they are walled in by the limitations of the sense perceptions. Not only is there a great deal more light than anyone has ever seen, but there are also unknown forms of light which no optical equipment will ever register. There are unnumbered colors which cannot be seen, as well as sounds which cannot be heard, odors which cannot be smelled, flavors which cannot be tasted, and substances which cannot be felt. Man is thus surrounded by a supersensible universe of which he knows nothing, because the centers of sense perception within himself have not been developed sufficiently to respond to the subtler rates of vibration of which that universe is composed. That's true, right? We have both infrared and ultraviolet, right? Those are two spectrums that we cannot physically see. We have various degrees of sound that we cannot make out. Now, smells, I don't know, but most likely I think these dogs back here could probably smell some things better than I can. And can probably smell some things that I absolutely cannot. They have much better olfactory senses. And so I don't have a problem with this at all. Among both civilized and savage peoples, color has been accepted as a natural language in which to couch their religious and philosophical doctrines. The ancient city of Ecbatana was described by Herodotus, its 7 walls colored according to the 7 planets, revealed the knowledge of this subject possessed by the Persian Magi. The famous ziggurat or astronomical tower of the god Nebo at Borsippa ascended in 7 great steps or stages, each step being painted in the key color of one of the planetary bodies. See Lenormand's Chaldean Magic. It is thus evident that the Babylonians were familiar with the concept of the spectrum in its relation to the 7 creative gods or powers. In India, one of the Mughal emperors caused a fountain to be made with 7 levels. The water pouring down sides through specially arranged channels changed color as it descended, passing sequentially through all shades of the spectrum. In Tibet, color is employed by the native artists to express various moods. L. Augustine Waddell, writing of northern Buddhist art, notes that in Tibetan mythology, white and yellow complexions usually typify mild moods, while red, blue, and black belong to fierce forms, though sometimes light blue, as indicating the sky, means merely celestial. Generally, the gods are pictured white, goblins red, and devils black, like their European relative. See the Buddhism of Tibet. In Meno, Plato, speaking through Socrates, describes color as an effluence of form, commensurate with sight and sensible. In Theaetetus, he discourses more at length on the subject thus. Let us carry out the principle which has just been affirmed, and nothing is self-existent, and then we shall see that every color, white, black, and every other color, arises out of the eye meeting the appropriate motion, and that what we term the substance of each color is neither the active nor the passive element, but something which passes between them, and is peculiar to each percipient. Are you certain that the several colors appear to every animal, say a dog, as they appear to you? We're going to talk about something that we talk about all the time because this seems like an appropriate place to put it, and you may not have seen the other videos. You have never seen a thing, right? You see the reflection of light from the thing. This phone case is not blue. It is every other color but blue because it reflects the blue, and that is what you see. So you assume that it is blue because you can see the blue. But the blue is the color that is reflected. It is not the blue that it actually is. It is the same with every single thing. Even a source of light, you are seeing direct sources of light, but you can't look directly at them, right? You can't see the direct source of the sun. If you do, you'll burn your eyes out. You can't really even look at a light bulb because if you do, you will get an after image. But you can look at the color of the light coming from the bulb. You can have the color of the light reflected from the clouds or refracted from the clouds. You can see light in a different way than you see other things, but you're still not really even seeing the light. You're seeing your perception of the light from other things. And so, once again, you do have a fundamental harmonic of life. There is visible spectrums, there is invisible spectrums. But it is important to keep in mind that nothing that you actually see is the actual color that you actually see it. This is not yellow. This is the color of everything else except yellow because it absorbs all of the colors except the yellow that it reflects. It's just something to keep in mind as you're conceptualizing color, especially in this type of a context. In the Pythagorean texts, the supreme symbol of the universe, forces, and processes are set forth the theories of the Greeks concerning color and music. The first 3 dots represent the threefold white light, which is the Godhead, claiming potentiality, all sound and color. The remaining 7 dots are the colors of the spectrum and the notes of the musical scale. The colors and tones are the active creative powers, which, emanating from the first cause, establish the universe. The 7 are divided into 2 groups, one containing 3 powers and the other 4, over a relationship known as a relationship also shown in the Tectrices. The higher group, that of the 3, becomes the spiritual nature of the created universe. That of the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, as the irrational sphere or inferior world. In the mysteries of the seven logi, or creative lords, are shown as streams of force issuing from the mouth of the Eternal One. This signifies the spectrum being extracted from the white light of the Supreme Deity. The seven creators or fabricators of the inferior spheres were called by the Jews the Elohim. By the Egyptians they were referred to as the builders, sometimes as the governors, and are depicted with great knives in their hands, with which they carved the universe from its primordial substance. Worship of the planets is based upon their acceptation as the cosmic embodiments of the seven creative attributes of God. The lords of the planets were described as dwelling within the body of the sun, for the true nature of the sun, being analogous to the white light, contains the seeds of all the tone and color potencies which it manifests. There are numerous arbitrary arrangements setting forth the mutual relationships of the planets, the colors, and the musical notes. The most satisfactory system is that based upon the law of the octave. The sense of hearing has a much wider scope than that of sound. For whereas the ear can register from 9 to 11 octaves of sound, the eye is restricted to the cognition of but 7 fundamental color tones, or one tone short of the octave. Red, when posited as the lowest color tone in the scale of chromatics, thus corresponds to Do, the first note of the musical scale. Continuing the analogy, orange corresponds to Re, yellow to Mi, green to Fa, blue to Sol, indigo to La, violet to Si. The 8th color tone, necessary to complete the scale, should be the higher octave of red, the first color tone. The accuracy of the above arrangement is attested by 2 striking facts. The 3 fundamental notes of the musical scale, the first, the third, and the fifth, correspond with the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. The 7th and least perfect note of the musical scale corresponds with purple, the least perfect tone of the color scale. In the Principles of Light and Color, Edwin D. Babbitt confirms the correspondence of the color and musical scales. As C is at the bottom of the musical scale and made with the coarsest waves of air, so is red at the bottom of the chromatic scale and made with the coarsest waves of luminous ether. As the musical note B, the 7th note of the scale, requires 45 vibrations of air every time the note C at the lower end of the scale requires 24, or but a little over half as many. So does extreme violet require about 300 trillions of vibrations of ether in a second, while extreme red requires only about 450 trillions, which also are but little more than half as many. Wait, what? 300 is not half of 450. When one musical octave is finished, another one commences and progresses with just twice as many vibrations as were used in the first octave, and so the numbers are repeated on a finer scale. In the same way, when the scale of colors visible to the ordinary eye is completed in the violet, another octave of finer, invisible colors, with just twice as many vibrations, will commence and progress on precisely the same law. When the colors are related to the 12 signs of the zodiac, they are arranged as the spokes of a wheel. To Aries is assigned pure red, to Taurus red-orange, to Gemini pure orange, to Cancer orange-yellow, to Leo pure yellow, to Virgo yellow-green, to Libra pure green, to Scorpio green-blue, to Sagittarius pure blue, to Capricorn blue-violet, to Aquarius pure violet, and to Pisces violet-red. In expounding the Eastern system of esoteric philosophy, H.P. Blavatsky relates the colors to the septenary constitution of man and the 7 states of color as follows: violet, Jaya, or etheric double; indigo, higher manas, or spiritual intelligence; blue, auric envelope; green, lower manas, or animal soul; yellow, buddhi, or spiritual soul; orange, prana, or life principle; red, kamarupa, or seat of animal life. I differ greatly from these, so if you would like to see mine, either comment below and I'll do another video, or go back and look at the other ones, but this is not right. The arrangement of the colors of the spectrum and the musical notes of the octave necessitates a different grouping of the planets in order to preserve their proper tone and color analogies. Thus, Do becomes Mars, Re the Sun, Mi Mercury, Fa Saturn, Sol Jupiter, La Venus, Si the Moon. See the ES instructions, and again, that is not correct. We have another tone here, right? This is the four elements and their consonant intervals. In this diagram, Flood has divided each of the four primary elements into three subdivisions. The first division of each element is the grossest, partaking somewhat of the substance directly inferior to itself, except in the case of the earth, which has no state inferior to itself. The second division consists of the element in its relatively pure state, while the third division is that condition wherein the element partakes somewhat of the substance immediately superior to itself. For example, the lowest division of the element of water is sedimentary, as it contains earth's substance in solution. The second division represents water in its most common state, salty, as in the case of the ocean, and the third division is water in its purest state, free from salt. The harmonic interval assigned to the lowest division of each element is one tone. To the central division, also a tone, but to the higher division, a half tone, because it partakes of the division immediately above it. Flood emphasizes the fact that as the elements ascend in the series of 2.5 tones, the diatessaron is the dominating harmonic interval of the elements. And so ends this section of the Secret Teachings of All Times. And I didn't have a whole lot to add to this one because music theory is not my thing. I love music. I sing, but I cannot play an instrument. I can. I can play the trumpet, but it has been, 30 years now since I played the trumpet, a little over 30 years. So I am sure I'm a bit rusty. But I was never the best trumpet player, right? I was third or fourth chair all the time because I would put in the effort. I would learn the things, but it did not come to me. My daughter, she's got it. Like, she has this. Like, she can hear a song one time and play it. She can sing in pitch for whatever. She has that gift that I don't have. My son, same thing. Not to the same degree, right? He enjoys music. He's in the band in college right now. He is actively auditioning, but there is no doubt that he is probably going to make it, right? He made it last year. He's more than likely going to make it this year because he invests himself in it in a way that I didn't. He doesn't have it like my daughter does, but both of them are more musically gifted than me, so I don't really have the expertise to speak on music. I do, however, on colors and on the basic theory underlying, right? The number 8 is the most important number in existence, right? 1, 3, and 8 all play together all the time. Those numbers are repeating all the time. 1 is the 1, 3 is the Trinity, and 8 is the fundamental harmonics of life. 7 normally is stipulated by 8 being the beginning of the new. So every time we saw 7 in here, there is an 8th. It is the over-encompassing, even if it's not stipulated in particular. In music, the 8th note is the repeat, the exact doubling of the previous. Right? So G goes to G. It's the doubling of the vibration. With light, it's the same thing, right? Ultraviolet is the doubling of red. And so we don't get to see it, but it still exists. Infrared is the doubling of the halving of ultraviolet. And so we, again, don't get to see it, but it does exist. It is the 8th outside of the current 7. The same with music, the same with color. Everything can be broken down into 8, 3, or 1. It really does work. I don't make that rule. I don't even stand on that rule, right? That is not my, but it works every damn time. And so I have to at least stand on it a little bit. There's 8 fundamental laws of creation. There are the fundamental harmonics of life. Our earth is separated into 7 pieces, and the atmosphere is separated into 7 pieces. There are 7 as a repeating pattern, as the 8th beginning the new, in pretty much everything. And so that is the part that I can lend some expertise to. I don't know musical theory in the way that is demonstrated Even in this illustration, right? I can recognize, okay, this is an ascending harmonic, double harmonic. I can recognize that, but the underlying stuff is like geometry. It just slips away. I can do algebra without ever putting pen to paper. I can look at a problem and piss my coach off. Like my teachers, my math teachers got mad at me all my life because they could put up the most complicated algebraic problem and I could look at it and solve it. I didn't have to write down shit. Geometry, I cannot get it. I just cannot seem to make it stick. Yeah, I know the basic shapes. I know how the things are supposed to work, but I just cannot. I can. I try, and it's just not sticking for me. I'm going to take, when I can pay for it, Randall Carlson's class on sacred geometry so I can try to get that to stick. We will probably talk about that as we go forward. I don't know what's left to deal with, but I'm sure sacred geometry will be in there somewheres. I have an example right here, Metatron's cube, that I drew myself, trying to understand these things. And I know the basics, but it's the underlying fit. Like, for some reason, it just will not stick in my head. And so I try not to talk about the things that I don't know about. I try to restrict myself to the things that I do. And hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. It is too difficult for me in many ways. Most of this I can do. Some of it I can. So I'm trying to separate that so that I am clear about what I am doing here. If you like what I'm doing, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to stay up. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks because I am not a communist. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.